Changes to the CBILS and bounce back loan schemes throw businesses another funding lifeline. How much have businesses borrowed through these schemes, and the unintended consequence of these changes. All of this in the latest Business Finance Bulletin. Well, not unexpectedly, the Chancellor and the government has announced some changes to the CBILS and the bounce back loan schemes, both of which have thrown businesses another funding lifeline. Now, not unexpectedly, the deadlines have now been extended, with extensive local lockdowns now starting to come into play, and the government being very, very cautious about how the economy is going to look over the next 6 months. It kind of made sense to extend the deadlines further. Previously, the CBILS had a deadline of 30th of September for applications to be with banks, and the bounce back loans, the deadline was the 4th of November. Well, the government seen sense and aligned these application deadlines and extended them to the 30th of November. So you now have until that deadline in which to get applications to the CBILS and bounce backs accredited lenders. The lenders then have another month until the end of December in order to process those applications. So some good news for businesses, perhaps who thought that they didn't need funding and didn't bother applying, but now, given the news that we could be facing another 6 months of uncertainty, perhaps now is the time to reassess whether you actually need to take advantage of these schemes. That's where the extra 2 months comes into play. Some other changes that have been made on both schemes, the deadline for repayments have now been extended up to 10 years, but it's down to lenders whether they wish to go that far. And specifically for bounce back loans, you can now ask for interest-only payments or a suspension altogether for a further 6 months. And the Chancellor said this won't affect your business credit record. However, do be aware, kind of mindful of this. Whilst it won't go on your company's credit file, it will undoubtedly be a red flag for lenders in future if you did ask for this kind of extension and forbearance. It's a kind of a red flag that perhaps you couldn't actually afford the payments in the first place. So some good news there about changes to these schemes. So if you were thinking that you now need money when you didn't before, now is the time to apply. Also, bear in mind, if you had a bounce back loan previously, you can still now upgrade to a CBILS by paying off your old bounce back loan and applying for extra funding. So you've got 2 months now in which to get your act together and get hold of that funding. With the news now that the government has extended the deadline on these two schemes, how much exactly has been borrowed? Now, previously the government and HM Treasury and UK Finance were issuing figures every week, but recently they've now stopped and just doing them monthly, and the latest figures came out last week. So how much has been lent out? Well, across all of the schemes, and that includes the larger version of the coronavirus and the future fund, in total £57.3 billion has been lent out, with total number of loans standing at 1,328,091. So you can see a large lump of money, £57 billion of new money pumped into the economy. How does this break down amongst the two of the main schemes? First of all, bounce back loans. Well, in total, the total amount lent out now stands at £38 billion, with total number of loans 1,260,940 loans. The approval rate stands at 81%. We see a large portion now of small businesses have taken advantage of this, with £38 billion has been borrowed. This is a huge sum of money. Turning to CBILS, well, there the total number of loans drawn, that comes to 66,585, with £15.5 billion lent out. There, an approval rate of just 47%. We can see a significant portion of businesses are not being successful when it comes to applying for CBILS, all for a variety of reasons. We can see in total £57 billion being lent out. That is a huge amount of money that's been pumped into the economy. But don't forget, it is actually borrowed money. It has to be paid back. Well, so far, all I've shared so far is good news about extension to the schemes and the amount of money that businesses have been borrowing. However, there are some unintended consequences of this that we do need to be aware of. First of all, the availability of this money. Now, I've mentioned this £57 billion has been borrowed by businesses, and that is money that now no longer needed to be borrowed from the smaller lenders. Over the last couple of years, as you know, the alternative finance market has grown and expanded. Over the last 6 months, since CBILS and bounce backs particularly came out, there's been a lack of demand at the lower end of the marketplace, typically where these smaller lenders kind of hung out. Well, going forward, you've got to think about, well, where are these lenders going to get their business from going forward? All of these businesses have now gorged on all of this debt that's been thrown at them. So one of the unintended consequences is we could see smaller alternative lenders having to exit the market simply because there is no more demand for finance. Looking at the bigger players, the high street banks, well, I've mentioned previously, we could see another credit crunch happening in 2021. The banks, by their very nature, are very risk averse. And I say, with £57 billion of new debt having been taken on, I guarantee the high street banks are going to be looking very carefully at future lending requests. They know that in Q2 2021, all of these repayments are going to start coming into play. And so that's going to affect the bank's appetite in terms of wanting to lend you money. Also, they're naturally going to be very cautious and pessimistic about the economy. So next year is going to be very difficult when it comes to raising finance. So we can see there are these unintended consequences. And the unintended consequence for you, of course, is the amount of money that businesses have borrowed. It has been relatively easy, particularly in terms of bounce back loans, to get hold of money. But at the end of the day, this money has to be paid back. It is not a gift from the government. And I do fear for many businesses that have taken on this debt when they realize now in, let's say, middle of next year about the extent of the repayments that they're going to have to make. And if the economy doesn't pick up as quickly as people hope, then there's going to be a lot of trouble next year in terms of businesses drowning in debt that they just cannot afford to pay. The message, of course, is go into this new debt wisely if you haven't taken any of these loans out yet. And, of course, take the appropriate advice next year if you think that you are going to get into trouble. Well, that's it for another bulletin. As ever, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to give it a like and a share. So that's it. Look forward to being with you next time. In the meantime, have a safe, profitable and healthy week.